Finally, are Chelsea healing? Hello friends, what's going on, and welcome on back to Football Therapy with me, your host Jan. I hope you're doing well, mate. Really do hope that. And of course, welcome back to Chelsea News, which is the daily series here on the channel where I reflect on the talking points of Chelsea Football Club / what's being said around the news, giving you my thoughts on it, but as always, more importantly, asking for yours. The vibes are up. We've beaten Tottenham Hotspur, I think, 5 times in a row in the last few meetings. There was an incredible performance last night where at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, a tactical masterclass from Enzo Maresca, limiting Tottenham to 0.05 XG, and an absolutely sensational performance from today's birthday boy, Moises Caicedo. There are great performances across the pitch. How far away are Chelsea from meeting our targets? Are we going to do it? Can we project? And our targets, of course, are Champions League qualification for next season, while of course playing in the Champions League this season. It's, tough act to juggle. Cup runs, of course, are a bonus. I'd love for us to win a domestic, cup, whether it's the league or indeed the FA Cup. We haven't won one for, 7+ years? We haven't won the League Cup for like a decade. We'll talk about meeting targets and where Chelsea are. I'm going to show you some stats. I'm also going to talk a bit more broadly about certain players. Of course, the £100 million men in both Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez. Reece James now totally available. What a miraculous return that's been. Quietly, he's gone about his business, and I think he's no longer injury prone, touch wood. And also, not the most positive story as well, I'm going to start on in just a moment. But thank you for joining me, as always. I'm really delighted to have you all here. Of course, we are closing in on 200,000 subscribers, which is sensational here on Football Therapy. I don't think you guys can see from the front end. I think you just see 199k, but I think it's about 600 subscribers off, to let you guys know. So we're closing in. Shouldn't be too long, so thank you to everyone who has subscribed. If you're a regular viewer who's yet to do so, you're welcome to, and it would help me out. So thank you for liking, subscribing, hyping up the video, all that stuff. So thank you very much. Let's get into it. Unfortunately, starting on not the most positive of stories. Many of you may have seen Wesley Fofana has been caught speeding. I think he was already had a driving ban, and that video has sort of gone viral. It's been published of him going on the outside, the left-hand side of a right-hand turn on the hard shoulder, speeding like an absolute numpty. He's pleaded guilty in court, Wesley Fofana, from this, and it's dumb. Look, these aren't the stories generally I cover. I try and stay out of sort of like tabloidy stories, whether it's like personal stuff with like wives or exes or girlfriends. I never touch any of that, and often, even sort of this kind of stuff I might not touch, but I do think this is important. Like, I covered the Enzo Fernandez stuff. It was kind of linked to Wesley Fofana, who of course tweeted that video of Enzo's Argentinian teammates singing that song. So similarly, I do think this is important because when we've passed the summer where we had the tragic loss of Diogo Jota through a driving accident, it's just a reminder that you gotta be really, really careful. Look, man, I used to have a sports car when I was in my early 20s. I drove fast. It was dumb. Do you know what I mean? And but I never did stuff like this, like he's doing. Just drive safely. Do you know what I mean? Especially now more than ever. And when you're on a ban, just as I come off a match review waxing lyrical about Wesley Fofana, probably my favourite centre back of the club. I really like him as a player. I'm so pleased he's being brought back into the team. But more than anything else, man, just be careful when you drive, because it's not just you, it's everyone else. So hopefully this is, no one was hurt in this, of course, which is great, but people can learn. Don't do that. Don't be a knobhead. It's silly. Right. Let's move on and talk about a different defender and some positive news. So Captain Reece James had an excellent performance away in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and really, he is back, baby. I just wanted to speak about this because, of course, I myself was reacting to headlines, to stories suggesting that, he was speaking to consultants, Reece James, saying, yeah, you should leave the UK, go and play in the Portuguese or Spanish climate. That will be better for your hamstrings and prolong your career. And for a long, long time, even before those headlines came out, people were saying, he's just never going to be back. And maybe he switched profile a little bit. Maybe he's not an absolute dynamic ground covering, flying wing back, where his hamstrings will perhaps be more in danger of going twang. And he's, of course, playing in more, perhaps, positionally reserved roles. But he's an amazing footballer. I keep saying recently, whether it's on my social media or here on YouTube, that he's convinced me, he's won me over as a captain. I always thought he was the best right wing back in the world, a world-class player, a character that is obviously proper Chelsea, the way he celebrates, the way he, goes into these derbies, that was never questioned. But I did have concerns about the way he would represent the club, the way he would communicate. I'm just going to say, is it scented properly? I'm just going to confusing me a little bit. There was a few things. Do you remember, when we didn't know who was going to be captain? I always thought Mason Mount had this sort of, politician vibe to be captain. Of course, lots changed since then, right? He's totally won me over. And in terms of his on-pitch performances, it's just incredible, really. And he's just always available. You can play him as a starting midfielder. You can play him as a sort of more reserved right back or a right centre back. You could genuinely play him as a right winger. If you say you don't have to track back as much, if you have if you had a Josh Champong playing a covering role behind him, Reece could definitely do a job at right wing, putting crosses in all the time, maybe even moving inside to take shots because he's got a wicked shot on him. And of course, he was a striker as a kid, Reece James. You could play him everywhere. He's an absolutely reliable character. And, he's up there. It's Cole Palmer, Moises Caicedo, and Reece James. And Reece James is always available now. So I feel like it's almost like you've got to have a moment we've made it through. We're here. He's no longer made of glass, and we've done it, and Chelsea's captain is available. And I just wanted to take time and reflect on that, especially after a big derby win. Bend a segment on the video reflecting on it. And similarly, in this next segment of the video, I want to speak about, of course everyone's speaking about birthday boy, Moises Caicedo, happy birthday, 24 years old, but I want to speak about him broadly as a pair with Enzo Fernandez. So of course they play incredibly different roles, and Enzo Fernandez's role has evolved under the coaching of Enzo Maresca. Of course we've seen Fernandez play as a CDM, for Argentina and other clubs, certainly like Benfica and in South America, but he's been playing as a sort of box crashing number 8 or number 10. He can play a little bit deeper Enzo and use his passing, but they've both basically silenced all the haters. Now, this is worth talking about because remember, they were both record transfers. When we signed Enzo Fernandez for £105 million from Benfica, I think we only paid 30 million up front. It was a very well-structured deal. It was, Chelsea, these new owners, Todd Bowley and Clear, they're spending loads of money. They've broken the transfer record. And similarly, we did it again with Moises Caicedo for 115. Now, we didn't do it in the same transfer window like Liverpool did with Wirtz, who was like 100, he was like a million more than Caicedo. And then, of course, Alexander Isak, there was a few more million. And both of those guys are being heavily criticised. I do think it was very, very difficult for both Caicedo and Enzo when joining Chelsea. Of course, Enzo Fernandez joined in that weird window where it was always mental for such a long time. A really bloated dressing room. No one really knew what we were doing structurally in the hierarchy, coaching-wise, squad building. It was an absolute mess. Moises Caicedo, of course, didn't get a pre-season. I reminded people in my match reaction yesterday that people are starting to go, oh, Caicedo's good, isn't he? Which is an absolute nonsense because he was... he had a shaky 6-month start at Chelsea because he had no pre-season. There was that weird Brighton, transfer war where they accepted £111 million from Liverpool, but he said, no, I want to go to Chelsea. Chelsea paid £4 million more quid. I don't know why we couldn't match it. That was a bit unfair. And then it took him a few months to get going. But then that first season, the end of that season, he was excellent. Last season, he was amazing. He cleared up at the awards, won all the Chelsea individual awards. And he started this season good. So he's been excellent for 2 years, nearly, basically, at Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? Point is, everyone's waxing lyrical about them now. You had Jamie Carragher on comms. He's actually done this a couple of times for Sky Sports, really, really waxing lyrical about Enzo Fernandez. You got the whole world highlighting how good Moises Caicedo is, and no one, absolutely no one, is talking about how much money they were bought for. They're all talking about Florian Wirtz and, of course, Alexander Isak at Liverpool now, who aren't even starting games for them at the moment. Look, they'll probably come good. They are amazing talents. But yes, no one's talking about the price tags of Chelsea's super expensive midfield duo. And of course, we have spent more money since, maybe not as much, but we're buying like 50, 60 million pound players, the odd 40, the odd 20 million pound player as well. It feels like this cathartic moment when no one is questioning the investment in those particular talents anymore. And it's nice, no more negative headlines, just praise for amazing players who are developing and getting really good. And both of them still have their prime in front of them. I think, of course, Caicedo's birthday is today. He's 24 years old. These players could be playing for the best part of a decade still at Chelsea, into their early 30s, if they're still doing the business. Do you know what I mean? And I think they will both prove to be excellent investments. And many people have already forecasted that. So there you go. I just wanted to spend some time and speak about that purely because the noise from the outside has changed. But let's speak a bit more collectively about Chelsea now. In the next segment, I'm going to do some comparison stuff, like just some matrix comparison on Data MB, a spider graph, because our target is to finish in the top 5. Now, I think Arsenal are definitely going to finish in the top 5. Our fears may be realised, and I think genuinely they're just going to win the Premier League. My biggest fear is they match/beat our defence record of under Mourinho, because they're not conceding goals. They're just not conceding goals. I think they're on course to beat our 15 goals conceded record. Look, a lot can change. We get to play them twice. We got to absolutely smash as many past them as possible just to change that. Hopefully they loosen up a little bit at the back. But we are trying to qualify for the top 5. And then you think about teams like Liverpool and Man City, who are probably both going to be in there comfortably. So it's about kind of matching their records. So far, the start of the season, they've both had Man City yet to play this weekend, but they've both had sort of indifferent starts in different ways. So I'm going to compare Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man City on a spider graph for you in this next graphic. Here we go, courtesy of datamb.football. These are the 3 teams on the spider graph. Manchester City represented on the blue, Chelsea in the red. I have no idea why those colours, that feels wrong. And Liverpool in the green. Now, Man City and Chelsea are the same for goals. Like I said, they've still got to play. Chelsea aren't on top for any of the other metrics, but if you look at the shape of that spider graph, it's a pretty strong shape for Chelsea. Goals, pressing, physicality, defending. Counters are quite low, but that will be by design from Enzo Maresca. And then, possession very, very high, just like Liverpool and Man City, and pretty attacking as well. This is a really balanced shape. Now, Liverpool really need to improve on their defending. As you can see, both Chelsea and Man City are much, much stronger. Now, Man City are heavily, dare I say, overly reliant on Erling Haaland, and both of the teams are happy to do counter-attacking football more than Chelsea. Now, I wanted to show you this because I liked the shape of the graph. It basically shows that we're pretty balanced as a team, actually. There's no massive flaw, apart from silly moments, perhaps games we should be winning. Like, for example, Sunderland at home. That's, of course, that is the loss in what is a very positive run for Chelsea in all competitions. You need to be winning that. It's a reminder to this young squad, don't get complacent. I know Sunderland are a very good outfit so far this season, but don't get complacent because that can happen. Yes, it's good that you can always get up for Tottenham. It's a massive derby. It's a massive game. Perform really well. The Chelsea fans love you for that. It's always just the tonic. But you need to be winning that game against Sunderland. And, there's some unfortunate red card related stuff, probably most notably Robert Sanchez away at Old Trafford. I know Manchester United have found some good form, but we are still better than them. And we should have got, not just lost, we should have basically won that game at Old Trafford, I think. We should have kept 11 players on the pitch. Obviously, that's a weird quirk when you look at statistical analysis because your first choice goalkeeper and Jorgensen for me is just not very good at all. But we are heading in the right direction, and with the reintroduction of Levi Cole, will be very late on in the season, but let's say Cole Palmer, in the next few weeks, Cole Palmer would be very, very useful, especially when you watch the game against Tottenham. You feel a little bit more creative spark between the lines. Stevao being more trusted. Now, I do endorse the decision to start Neto over him because he's very intelligent. He knows what Maresca needs, and he's a canny operator in the Premier League. But the more, Stevao, because you want Stevao to take risks and not play it safe. That's why you're bringing him on as this closer, as this wild spark at the end. Go and express yourself. You don't want to douse that flame of talent and expression. But as he's still a child, as he grows up and settles in a little bit more, and Wesley Fofana coming back, this sort of data that we've got so far from the opening 10 games, is pretty balanced. And if you take away the disciplinary stuff, I think I'm pretty positive about it. And I'm feeling like we should meet our target, which of course is top 5. Now, I've actually checked the average odds on, of what people are betting on, essentially, of who goes where. Chelsea are unanimously fourth favourite to qualify for the Champions League. Of course, you need the top 5. So it's Arsenal, are just absolutely there. Man City and Liverpool are incredibly heavy odds on. And then Chelsea are a little bit further ahead of Man United, who are in to get 5th place, apparently. That could, of course, change. Lots can change. I feel Chelsea are you look at Man United, they're only playing once a week, which is really beneficial for them. That's probably why they're so high. But they're kind of like all available and they're playing, aren't they, in terms of their attackers? Whereas Chelsea, we've got players to come back. We've got children to grow up, and I think as we settle into the, if we qualify, say, for out of the league phase of the Champions League with a couple of games to spare, that would be really, really beneficial. I do think we can get top 5. I'll reiterate what I always say. I'm looking for a points total. I would love for Chelsea to reach 75 points. If we can do that while navigating a champion, we got 69 last season. If we had 6 points, so like 2 extra wins, on top of playing a much harder competition in the Champions League, I would be very, very content with that. I'd like a trophy. We're not going to win the Premier League. Newsflash, I'm sorry to tell people that. I'm sure you guys have all accepted that emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But we could win any of the other cups, genuinely. And I include the Champions League in that. Why not? Why not? We beat PSG in the Club World Cup final. I know these players can get up for massive high-profile games, whether it's Tottenham away, whether it's Liverpool at home. We've already seen that this season. We saw that in the Club World Cup. We got slapped about by Bayern Munich away, which is a little bit worrying. But, you get to like a final in a neutral venue. Why not? I think we can do it. I think Maresca is very good at setting up. Even if that's a bit fanciful, just doing well in the Champions League, making that revenue, I'd love for us to win a league or FA Cup, because it's been way too long, like I said at the top of the video. Anyway, some positive reflections there, of course. There'll be daily news back here tomorrow and onwards, and of course coverage of the Karabag match. That will be an instant match reaction, because it's not a late 8 PM kickoff. So thank you for liking and subscribing. We'll check out what some of the more generic transfer news and rumours are, as well as time goes on in the coming days. So thank you again for supporting, and I hope to see you back here soon. Take care. Peace.
You ain't so tough with that bad boy tuck. I'ma get it how I'm living, I'ma walk the walk. Outline my lines, I rap through thought. Body bag the verse, outlined in chalk. In my life seen trouble, hustle on the double. Silence on the trigger like my pick got a muzzle. Yo chick like to guzzle, bad boy stay in trouble. I only love this paper, sorry I don't. I laugh me baby.